Hello folks, my name is Jonathan Mortimer. I'll be taking you through the module of 3D modelling. What we've got here is the first lecture, or the first tutorial. What I'd like to do is start off by explaining where you can download your own personal use software if you wish. The labs will have all the software you need. We'll be using Autodesk 3D Studio Max, but what I'd like to do is talk to you about where you can get your own free software from the Autodesk educational community. I'll put a link on Moodle for you so you can gain access. What we have here is there's on the educational community for Autodesk, they have some great links and tutorials if you want to learn beyond what will be covered in this module. This module will mostly cover the fundamentals of modeling in 3D Studio Max, and we'll try and get a little bit of Mudbox in there too. For the education community, you can download multiple types of software. So I'll give you a wee list here of all the different products. So you can download Maya, Mudbox, 3D Studio Max, and all you need to do to get it completely free is basically create an account, which you'll be using your university email address. And that's it. You can actually get the most recent version, the same that the university has. So the one I'll be talking you through today will be 2018. You can get some older versions if you want, but it's probably if you're new to 3D modeling or new to the 3D Studio Max software, I'd recommend just sticking with the same software the university has as much as possible. Great. So as soon as you open up Autodesk 3D Studio Max, the student version, you'll be met with the welcome page and the splash screen, which will help guide you. So I'll give you some pointers of what I would recommend you look at and explore, but of course you can follow different videos and tutorials from YouTube, the Autodesk educational community, or even through 3D Studio Max's own tutorials. It's entirely up to yourself, basically whatever works for yourself. That's the important feature. When you first open up Max at home or in the university, if you get a box that asks you for the classic or design version of Max, I would recommend you go with the classic. There's slight differences, but we don't need to cover all that today. So this is the basic layout of Autodesk 3D Studio Max, and this is the 2018 version. If you have downloaded or have previously looked at an older version of Autodesk 3D Studio Max, it will seem slightly different, and just in terms of colour. The layout will be very similar. The only difference will be there'll be some new functions, particularly towards animation, which we won't cover in this one. So it does look, or I imagine it looked quite daunting the first time you open up if this is the first time dipping into 3D. You have 4 screens here, split into the front view, top view, left view, and a perspective view. We have the steering cubes that if you left click and hold with your mouse, you can actually spin round and change the perspective views. You can do that for all the different views if you wish. You can change and edit them back and forth to change them from orthographic to perspective or whatever you wish to do. So you have 4 views to work with here. Multiple buttons and multiple tools. I would probably recommend, if first couple weeks just to get started, not to overload yourself too much. What I like to do with my students is just get them to start making some objects and then getting a bit more familiar with the actual layout and workspace. So on the right hand side here, we have the geometry section here, and there's some other options that we'll be talking about in future lectures, such as shapes, and if you've left click, the tab changes to give you more options. We have lights, we have camera, and these other settings, but we will cover that at a later time. In geometry, we have the default setting, which is standard primitives, which is a drop-down menu that we can change to different functions, but we'll just stick with the standard primitives for now. Object type, we have box, sphere, and all these options here. As I said, I'd recommend that if you're new to 3D Studio Max, it's just getting used to the layout and how to create and manipulate objects is probably the first port of call. So we'll start off with box. So left click, it'll be highlighted blue. Some more parameters will appear down at the bottom here. In the perspective view, I'd like you to left click and hold and drag to make the square. That'll make the base, release, and then drag up and left click once again to basically stop and complete your cube. Now, don't worry if it goes outside of your viewport. We can click this option here, which says Zoom Extends All. So it's not the bottom option, it's the second from the bottom. And all it does is just kind of help central everything out into our viewports. We can use the roller function within the mouse itself. If we have a viewpoint selected, you'll be able to tell it's selected with the golden or yellow edge around it. So any viewport that I have selected will have this golden border around it. We can roll back and forth to zoom back in and out, and we can use the hand icon for pan to left click and drag and manipulate it. And of course we can still use the steering cubes to change the perspective. Because we're just working with a cube, we don't have to worry too much about it. Okay guys, so once you have your box, your cube actually created, we can left click to actually change the parameters. Now, on the command panel on the right hand side, the plus sign will be the create tab. That allows you basically to create multiple objects, and the modify tab, which is the one next to it, allows you to edit and change the parameters. So where we have the box selected, if it's not selected, it'll disappear. So left click on your object, and the parameters we can actually change. So if we want to make all the numbers the same or different, or what the case may be, we can actually go through and change these sections. We'll leave it there for now, because for the introduction I just want to keep it nice and simple. We could go into segments and pivot points and so forth, but we'll leave that for another tutorial. We can use the pan tool once again to start the center and fit it out. If you wish to, with the pan tool still selected and the roller function on your mouse, roll back so we can actually create new objects for you. The three most common tools that you use within the first week or so, which is the move tool, the rotate tool, and the uniform and scale tool. So to start off, if we left click on the move tool, as soon as I left click, you'll have 3 arrows that appear in 3 different colours, and these correspond with 3 different axes. If you left click on the arrow, you can move the object in one axis or another, or if you so wish, where 2 axes come together with a square, left click and hold, and you have free range to move across these 2 axes. Or if you find the central pivot point, then you'll be able to move and manipulate that back and forth. So it's a good exercise of getting used to the move tool and where you can position your objects in a 3D space. With the object still selected, you can use select and rotate. I pull back slightly. A similar function will appear as in from the move tool. You can rotate it in one axis, another, or if you go in the central, you can then have free range of where to rotate and manipulate it. And of course, if you get to a stage that you need to step back, use Ctrl Z in the keyboard and it will undo what you have done. And finally, we have the select and uniform scale tool. Left click to select. You can scale your object across one axis, another, or if you wish, to the edge of 2 axes, you can actually start pulling out the object, or if you go to the central triangle or pyramid, you can scale the entire object. Okay, so with that done, I usually find that the best exercise is to create multiple objects and start moving and positioning within the 3D space, so you get used to creating objects and using the tools that we just talked about. So I'll pan back a little bit. I'll left click and hold to create my sphere. After you created your sphere, left click on cylinder, left click and hold to create the base, release to create the height, and left click. We can go for the torus, left click to select it, left click and hold, and after you release, you have an option of basically how thick you want to make it. Don't worry, we can change them later on in the parameters and modify section. Once you're happy, left click. Go to teapot, left click and hold, and create your teapot. Now you can do that with the rest, or if you want to just keep it at 4 or 5 objects, that's perfectly acceptable. Left click off the objects to deselect it. We're going to go to zoom extends all. If you have one object selected and press zoom extends all, it will basically central that object alone into the different viewports. If you left click off an object and left click with nothing selected on zoom extends all, which is not the bottom tool but the one above that, you'll see all the objects in your scene. Now, if you can use the move tool, we're going to start repositioning these objects around in any order you wish. You can put objects on top of other objects, back and forth, and just get used to the space. You can pack objects, you can position them any way you see fit. If you find it hard to see the objects due to the grid behind, with whatever viewport you selected, press G on your keyboard and it will allow you to get rid of the grid if you find that difficult to see for whatever reason. I like to work in one viewport at a time because I find it easier just to kind of get everything set up. Move to another viewport, rearrange them, and to make them fit. I'll leave that there for now. We'll just do it by eye for now, because we're just having a bit of fun. And I'm probably going to use the rotate tool to rotate it down and try and give the impression that this is leaning against the object. I'll rotate the teapot a little bit, and if you want, you can also select the box and just rotate it so it's not quite so square. Okay, a nice simple scene. Nothing too complicated or excessive there, but allows you to create the different objects, use the different tools, and of course you can use the scale tool to finish everything off to make the teapot big, small, or whatever the case may be. If you have an object selected, plus sign is the create tab, modify tab is 1 over, you can change the radius of the sphere to anything you see fit. For the torus, you can change the 2 radiuses, one for the outer and another one for thickness, and you can put a slight twist if you see fit for that. Okay, you can change all these functions and just get used to the settings. What I'll do there is I'll just move that up a little more. You can, if you wish, go back to the create tab, create a plane, and in the top view, left click and hold to create a surface for your scene to rest upon. And of course, if you have more time, you can go down in a bit more detail and start pulling it up and see, make sure it gives the impression that the objects are resting upon the plane. Once you've done that, I'd recommend going to File and go to the Save As function and save your scene. The important thing about using Max is, or any software, is save regularly, as much as you possibly can. For the tutorials that we'll get into very shortly, I will talk to you about saving your file in 2 or 3 different formats, or I'll be talking to you about saving your file as 2 or 3 different names, so that if anything goes wrong, you can go back to an earlier version of your scene. Okay guys, to summarise, what I'd like you to do is create your own scene using the standard primitives. You can make your own arrangement and you can create as many as few as you wish. I'd like you to use the move, the rotate and uniform scale tool to create your scene, and remember to save it, please. Any questions or problems, feel free to ask me. I'll be in the lab and you'll have my details.